Right. Welcome tonight to part three of the Women in Agriculture Whole Farm Plan series, where tonight we're going to be discussing the Animal Health and Welfare Plan with SRUC vet Megan Fergusson. So for tonight's webinar, just introduce myself. My name's Alison Clark. I work for SAC Consulting in Stranraer. Um, and I'm going to be chairing tonight's webinar. And we're joined by Megan Fergusson from the SRUC Vet Services based in Ayr, who is going to talk through the Animal Health and Welfare Plan, what the requirements are for the whole farm plan, and what the benefits can be to your business by getting involved in that. So I will just hand over to Megan to get started.
Right, good. So let's crack on. So yeah, as Alison said, she's chairing, I'm speaking, and the aims of tonight. So we've been doing a lot of animal health planning chat, farmer meetings, etc., vet meetings, because it's come up in the whole farm plan. So it's all, a lot of people are talking about it. Previously maybe didn't do one, now require one. So we're going to put it in context. Who needs to do it? Why do you need to do it? Who this applies to. Now, with everything, there are minimal requirements that you can do to tick the box, but you can use it to your advantage. And we're going to, that's mainly what the chat is tonight, is, how to use your herd or flock health plan to your advantage. And yeah, this picture here is where we are. So we've got some hill ground and some lowland ground. And from a health planning point of view, I always get a summons the night before the farm insurance is due or something like that to complete it. And it really is something that can be used much more to its advantage than that. When I do this meeting in person, I often get people to raise their hands, how many people use it as a tick box exercise, and the majority of the room will put their hands up and admit they do use it as a tick box exercise. But hopefully after this meeting, you'll be enthused to use it to your advantage more than just ticking the boxes and fulfilling the minimal requirements. So the next few slides I've got, I've actually borrowed from Osla, who did the first webinar in this series, because she put it into context really well, where the health plan lies, why it's required. So we're just going to review that, and I would signpost her webinar for you to go back and listen to if you want this in full. So we'll flick through her slides of just putting it in context, and then we'll get into using it to more of a greater advantage. So yeah, all these webinars I've been talking about the whole farm plan. It applies to all crofts and farms, regardless of size. And you can see in here, I'll get this little pointer, hopefully. Laser pointer. So the animal welfare plan is part of the 5 audits and plans. And yeah, as you'll all probably have heard already, you have to have 2 elements in place by May next year, which will come scarily quickly because we're marching on to the end of the year pretty quickly already. So who does what and how often? Tonight we're talking about the Animal Health and Welfare Plan. So it's applicable to livestock keepers, and it has to be reviewed annually. And I'll use that word annually a bit loosely because, as you'll see later on, in my opinion, and a lot of its opinions, think it should be reviewed more than annually, but as a minimum, it's an annual review of your animal health and welfare plan. So yeah, it applies to livestock keepers, and what is a livestock keeper? So that's any number of cattle, sheep, goats, deer, alpacas, llamas, pigs, or if you've got over 350 poultry. Now, your animal health and welfare plan for your whole farm plan does not need to be completed and signed off by a vet. We would recommend that you get your vet involved. They're definitely, someone to have involved in the discussions, but to tick those minimum requirements, they don't have to be. And yeah, very minimum. What do you need to do for it? So you need contact details for who's responsible for animal health within your business. So the animals on your holding, who is ultimately responsible for the health and welfare of those animals. You need to obviously be registered with a vet practice, so you need their details on there as well. And the types and numbers of livestock kept, details of breeding stock and how many livestock born, a disease risk assessment and management plan. So a herd plan is basically a big risk assessment. So we'll come on to this a bit more, but it's assessing, what is the risk of a disease coming onto my herd or flock, and should I be putting in mitigation to stop that happening? A calendar is often included, so you can go through the year and just pinpoint, when are we going to do this intervention, be it vaccines or, fecal testing before worming, that sort of thing. Get them in the calendar when you're going to be planning to do them. You need to have a euthanasia policy, if something breaks its leg, heaven forbid, some sort of disaster, how are you going to attend to that animal's welfare as quickly and as efficiently as possible? And you need to have details of who your fallen stock management plan is, whether that's a local contractor, then they need to be in there as well. So that would be the minimal requirements that you need for the whole farm plan. Now, as I said, it does not need to be signed off by a vet, but you do need to confirm that you've had veterinary input within the last 12 months. So as vets, we can only prescribe for animals that are under our care, and by under our care, we need to have, been on the holding, we've seen the animals. So that's where that comes in. And there's slightly different rules there for crofting areas and crofters. Admittedly, from Ayrshire, it's we don't have that sort of setup down here, but it certainly will apply to some of you online. So just a few applicable things to crofters there. But if you go to Osla's presentation, you'll get much more detail on that in there, and obviously speak to your local vet and your local consultants as well, and they will tailor this advice to your local area and what applies specifically to you. So there is templates online that you can use for this. So there's a QMS template, and a lot of you, if you're farm assured, you will already be doing this. You might have the QMS one, or you might have one with your vets. There are online tools, which I'll go into more detail later, or you can sit down and complete it with your vet. And it's a really good way to build up a really nice relationship with your vet. You get to know them, they get to know you, they get to know your holding, what your plans are, what your aims are, rather than you just having them out to an emergency. And it's just a really good way to build up a relationship, and they can help you improve productivity and ultimately profitability in your herd or flock. So that was sort of a recap of what Osla had done in her presentation. So yeah, like I said, go back and listen to it if you want more detail on it. So it was the very first in this series. And that's kind of highlighted the very minimum that you have to do. So let's go on and talk about making the most of health planning. How can we do that? So making the most out of health planning. The thing to remember with health plans is one size does not fit all. Put this pointer off. There we go. So one size does not fit all. You cannot do a health plan, like a vet can't do a health plan and give it out to all their clients, because all farms are different. And basically a health plan is a massive risk assessment. And if we advertised a webinar on risk assessment, there's absolutely no way I would sign up to it, because it would be a very dry subject. But looking at health planning as a risk assessment makes it interesting. So why is the disease risk for all farms different? So all farms have different buying in policies. Some will only buy from one source, some will buy from markets, some won't buy in at all. Farm boundaries, think about what stock your neighbours have. Is some of your neighbours' ground rented out at some times of the year? So do you have animals, that potentially have nose-to-nose contact with your animals that you don't know where they've come from, you don't know their origin? Do you have, a motorway at one side or a road? Do you have rivers? Are there physical boundaries to stop nose-to-nose contact over the fence? That sort of thing. So yeah, just have a think about. And when I'm talking about all this stuff, I'd really like to think about your situation, because these things have to be tailored to your farm. So when I'm talking about all this, think about, how does this apply to me? So think about your buying in policy, and we're not at all saying don't buy in, because from a business point of view, sometimes you need to. But just think about, what are the risks that I'm buying in? So if I'm buying in stock, what diseases could they possibly bring into my farm? Or equally, if I'm buying in animals, are the animals already on my farm a risk to those animals that are coming in? Now, the classic one would be something like enzootic abortion in sheep. If you're buying in unvaccinated animals, then they're obviously naive and could contract the disease over lambing time and end up with a high amount of abortions. Or it could be that the ones you've already got at home aren't vaccinated, and the ones you buy in actually bring it in. So there's sort of two dynamics to think about there. And that's just an example of one disease. Yeah, again, think about in your situation, think about your farm boundaries. What are my neighbours doing? What are they buying in? Where are those animals coming from? Think about your current disease status. Do you know what's currently on your farm? Do you know what your risks are? And just to throw something else into the pot, is disease risk is dynamic. It's changing all the time. It doesn't stay the same year to year. It doesn't even stay the same month to month, which is why I would argue that this should be done on more than a yearly basis. Think about current threats like Schmallenberg and blue tongue. These are all things that are happening down south. There's absolutely no reason why they can't or won't affect us, and we are certainly within the vet labs looking out for them. And that they're just an example of things that can change very quickly over a small amount of time. But also you can get non-exotic diseases, for example, liver fluke. That disease risk is dynamic. It can change, depending on the weather, depending on your grazing policy, depending on what stock you've got and what ground. All these things can change basically on a daily basis and within farms. So it's not even the same, for the whole of Scotland. We can't say that, the disease risk for X disease is this. It changes based on your farm and even within fields within farms. So there's a lot to think about, and I think it's really interesting if you sit and think about your own farm, how this applies. But why are we worried about disease? Why are we thinking, what's the risk? What's the risk to my herd? Well, the ultimate aim that we all enjoy farming, we all enjoy the good days, and we all have bad days as well. But we ultimately all do it to make a small profit, I would hope. So what risks the disease have to profitability? So the bottom line. So you can have your direct costs such as milk drop, reduced fertility, abortions, reduced daily live weight gain, and daily dead animals. So basically, that is all affecting your profitability because you're getting less animals on the ground to sell because ultimately that's what your profit is. Less weight on those animals, um, or if your market is milk, then you're going to be producing less milk. That can also apply to beef and sheep. If animals are producing less milk, then your daily live weight gains are going to be affected. So I would say they're direct costs. And then you've got indirect costs as well, such as medicine, vet time, labour, and any product that you have to throw away. There's nothing like a waste of time going through, jagging calves, treating sick animals. If you can keep them all healthy, it's a much more enjoyable job for everyone. And yeah, like time is crucial on a lot of our holdings. And if you have to spend time going through treating animals or, even spending time with a vet, testing sick animals, it's not fun. No one enjoys it. So ideally we want to avoid it. So that is part of what your health plan is trying to avoid any disease coming in. I mean, yes, we're not going to completely eliminate disease. You're going to get disease that's endemic, such as pneumonia, that sort of thing, but you can try and limit new pathogens coming in. You can try and protect the stock that's there by putting in place, vaccinations or, planned treatments, that sort of thing. And that should all play a part of your health plan as well. So we were talking earlier on about, bringing stock in, that could be a risk. But also the stock that you currently have could be a risk to brought in stock. So how do you know what's already on your farm? And as part of this big risk assessment, you need to know what's currently here, and what we're trying to control that's already in the flock or herd, and what do we not want to bring in. So how do you establish flock or herd status? Well, the answer is do some testing. And the samples that you require will depend on disease. So, a lot of diseases you could take, if you're a dairy, you could take a bulk milk sample to check for antibodies for lots of things like BVD, leptospirosis, IBR, salmonella. Blood samples, you could be checking if you've got a particular problem with pneumonia. You could check to see what young calves have been exposed to, therefore what pathogens are on your farm, therefore could I be, doing something about this. Swabs as well from cases of pneumonia are really, really useful. So acute cases of pneumonia, just a simple swab up the nose. We can quite often isolate particular pathogens that are involved. And caveat to that, pneumonia is not just a one bug disease. It's a lot of bugs that are involved and a lot of environmental factors. But these investigations can really help you build up a picture of what's going on rather than just treating things, not knowing if you're using the right antibiotic, not knowing if they even need antibiotic. And by investigating what bugs are involved, you can build that into your health plan to hopefully stop those animals getting sick in the first place, or at least reduce the risk or the severity of disease. Um, Feces testing, really topical just now. You know, a lot of people are fecal worm egg counting before they worm. Fluke as well, you know, testing for fluke is a really good thing to do rather than just go ahead and treating. By doing that, you're going to save yourself money because you might not actually need to treat. You're going to extend the longevity of products that are used because you're not going to be promoting resistance. And yeah, the bottom there, I've put post-mortem examinations. That's our bread and butter in the vet lab. That's what we do a lot of, and it's a really useful way to know what diseases are in your herd. Particularly, we do around about this time of year a lot of cull ewe screens. So if you've got cull ewes, you know, possibly later summer, they've been weaned, you've given them 6 weeks on feed, they've still not put weight on. Why have they not put weight on? They're good ones to sacrifice, get them in for a post-mortem. And we can, you know, screen them for lots of diseases like mydevisna, for Johne's, for fluke, for OPA, you know, all these things just by, you know, doing a few post-mortems. And if we don't diagnose any of these things, that's great because we can say, well, you know, this one just had bad teeth, or, you know, this one had something else going on. But the good news is, you know, there was no sign of Johne's, there was no sign of mydevisna. There's no sign of OPA, and that's kind of a good pat in the back, a good reassurance that actually these diseases maybe aren't an issue in my flock. And that's really useful information for your health plan, because you can be reassured that, you know, they're probably not in your flock, but how do you keep them out? So that's the risk that you put into you build into your health plan to stop that happening. Um, so yeah, we talked about, is there a risk of disease being introduced? So think about what bought in animals that you bring in. Some people will just bring in tups. If you are bringing anything in, do you bring it from the same source all the time? Or do you go to markets and buy from, you know, particular people? Do you go to markets and just buy the ones that you like? Do you have any quarantine procedure in place for anything coming in? So ideally, you'd want them quarantined and follow the SCOPS guidelines, so the Sustainable Control of Parasites. It's a really good website actually to look up. There's really good quarantine procedures on there. So if you just Google SCOPS, SCOPS, find those quarantine procedures. And again, this is something that you should build into your health plan. It's useful to have your vet on board to advise you on these things. But yeah, ideally, anything coming in, you would quarantine them. You would treat them for worms and fluke. Think about scab as well. You don't want to be bringing that in. So ideally, anything coming in, you'd quarantine them and make sure they don't have any of these diseases before they join your flock, because it's much easier to treat a small amount of animals than to treat the whole flock once it's going rampant. So that's specifically to bought in animals, but yeah, like I said, think about neighbouring stock. Do your neighbours rent out? So is there, you know, different stock coming through their fields? Other people who come and visit are a disease risk. You know, do you use any contractors? Do you use clippers? Do you use somebody for your dipping? That sort of thing. And do you show, or do you take things to sales? And maybe, you know, they're going off the farm, they're meeting with other animals, and they're coming back. This is all a disease risk. And we're not saying don't do it. But as long as you've thought about the disease risk and you've calculated, you know, how big the risk is there anything I can do to mitigate that? You know, anything that's going to sales or shows during the summer, should they be, you know, quarantined in their own little paddock between shows, so that if, heaven forbid, they should bring something back, like, you know, scab or something like that, then they're not giving it to the whole flock, you know, they're just keeping it in their little group. Yeah, just have a think about these things in relation to your farm. Are any of these things possible? So when I do these health plan talks, we always talk about the perfect target. And if I was sitting in a room with you guys, I would get you all to write down your perfect target. What would be your perfect year farming be? And most people will come up with more live lambs or calves at some point in the year, because essentially that's your profitability. So more live lambs at the end of lambing or calving, more live ones at weaning, or more live ones at selling. Wherever you set your benchmark, that's fine. But that's what most people desire. That's the big aim, the big year. If you're looking at this on a 12-month basis, that's what you're aiming for. And it'd be interesting to know if anyone's got any different perfect targets, because these are the ones that usually come up when we do these meetings. And some people will say, well, I'd really like my calves to be growing more. I'm quite happy with the amount I've got on the ground. But I'd really like my calves or my lambs to be, growing more. That's my target. So it's really good to write that down and sit around the table with everyone that should be involved. So talking about who should be involved in your health plan. So all farm staff, anyone that works on the farm should be involved in this conversation. And it can just be over lunchtime, over morning tea, have a chat about it. What is our aim? What are we trying to do here? So anyone on the farm should be involved. Your vet is definitely a good person to have involved. And like I say, they don't have to be involved in every time because as we're going to come on to, ideally we want to be reviewing this and you don't have to have your vet there every time, but at some point they're good just for, up-to-date current health advice. They're a really good source of what's going on in your area, what are the disease risks in your area. So you wouldn't be wanting to miss out on that information by not having them involved. So I really would encourage you to have your vet involved. And like I say, it's a really good way to build up a good relationship with them. Um, Anyone else who's involved in the health or welfare of your animals, so nutritionists, would definitely have them involved. Any SQPs that you use for buying wormers, so suitably qualified people, they're giving you health advice. They should definitely be involved as well. Like your local SAC consultant or any other consultants you use, they're up to date again on current local affairs, policy, that sort of thing, will all be relevant to this. So it's good just to have all these, and you don't have to have them all sitting down at the table at the same time, but it's good if you can at least, start the chat by having, a wee farm staff meeting. Be like, right, what is our perfect target? What are we actually trying to do here? It's good if everyone is on the same page. And yeah, all of these things can be addressed in a proactive health plan. So what's going to stop us having, so our perfect target here is at the end of lambing, we want more live lambs on the ground, right? What's going to stop us getting there? We're going to lose them. So deaths round about lambing and calving. So it's really good to record when these happen. So lamb and calf loss, do you lose them at birth? Do you lose them up to 7 days? Do you lose them at weaning? Do you lose them, up to selling? Where are your pinch points? Where does most of your loss happen? And that's a really good way to hone in on, why is it happening? Can we better that? And what health interventions should we put into place to stop that happening? And mostly, so if your losses are happening, at birth up to 7 days, think about, why could that be happening, and what can we do to stop that? If you're thinking about daily live weight gains and you're like, oh, could really do with these growing a wee bit more, what might be stopping that? So disease could definitely be stopping that, and also nutrition as well. And yet all of these can be addressed in a proactive health plan. So sitting down with your perfect target at the beginning of the year is great, and you can do your yearly health plan. You can jot down, right, we're going to vaccinate them in this month with whatever, and we're going to do some fecal worm egg counting in this month with whatever. But I think by doing it on a yearly basis, you lose sight of what you're trying to get to, and you just get lost in day-to-day life. Problems come up, you muddle your way through them, that's great. But I think it's really useful to look at this more regularly. And we'll come on to how to do that in a wee minute. But we talked about how your health plan can improve profitability. So I've just popped some figures up here. This is just a wee spreadsheet we quite often use at these meetings. And this is for sheep. You could do the same for cattle as well. So this is just a wee example. I'm just going to look at my big screen here because my numbers are bigger. So you can see, looking at the bottom of this spreadsheet here, ewe mortality percent all year. I'll try and get my wee pointer up here so you can see better. So ewe mortality percent all year. So we've set a target here of 3%. So that's a 12-month target of 3% ewe loss. And if we were doing really good in a really good year, we could hopefully get 1%. And in a really bad year, we had an absolute shocker, lost 10% of ewes. That's a massive loss, right? And on the line below, got a target scanning percent of 180 If we do really good, we could maybe increase that to 200. Or if we have a shocker of the year, that'll be 120%. That's scanning. And then and these figures are all connected to losses, right? So, you use a you lose a ewe, you're not going to get lambs out of her. If you lose her at the wrong time, you might lose her and the lambs. Your scanning percent is the ultimate number of calves or lambs you're going to have on the ground. So fertility is very, very important for that, for profitability. Because if you don't have the lambs or calves in them, then you can't have them to sell. So ultimately, your scanning percent is a really, really important figure. And you don't have to scan, but the point is fertility is really, really important as a driver for profitability. And then, yeah, the first place you might lose some lambs in this example is abortions. So ideally, we want no more than 5%. Even that's getting a bit high, I'd argue. If we have a really good year, we will only lose 1% to abortions. Or if we have an absolute shocker, then 25%, that's a big loss before we've got anywhere near lambing. And then early mortality, 8% is the target, which I'd say is a pretty ambitious target in some years, because obviously we're talking about risk health planning, and some years you just get shockers. The weather, you can't do anything about that, like this year. Hopefully we don't see a year like that for a while, but yeah, this year I'd say that would be really ambitious. We're saying here a perfect target would be 5% loss, and a really bad year, 30% loss. And then we've got growth rates here. Ideally, we want them to be somewhere about the 200. And a really good year, they could be growing a bit more. And on a poor year, they could be doing a bit less. Right, and then we've got the bottom line here, where the difference between the worst case scenario and the absolute best case scenario is almost £10,000. Right? So that's our profitability. And these figures are pretty much plucked out of the air. So, don't take these as gospel. You can do this yourself for your own farms. But look at the difference. If we can just push a few of these measurements up the way, we can really push a bit more profitability. And this is what I mean about using your health plan to push profitability on your farm. So say this year, the worst case scenario is like a nutritional problem. The ewes just are a wee bit skinny. They're just not performing right. So we improve that a wee bit more. We address it. We get a nutritionist involved. We look at body condition scores. So they scanned a wee bit better. We got them up to 180%. And then because they were in better condition, less of them aborted. So we've reduced abortions a wee bit. And then they're in better condition, so their colostrum's better. They're lambing down heavier birth weight lambs. The lambs are getting up and suckling. The colostrum's better quality. So we're losing less of them at lambing time. And because the ewes have got more milk, they're growing a bit better as well. And just by doing those simple things, we've gone from a loss of £5 per ewe to a £21 gain per ewe, which affects your bottom line here. And like I say, these figures are just sort of plucked out the air a wee bit, but it's just an example of how, a few health interventions, a wee bit of risk planning can really affect your bottom line, and it's worth spending the time and spending money doing it. And yeah, forecasting ahead is good to give you a target to get to. So leaving that, let's talk about who should be involved. We've already covered this a little bit. So definitely you should be involved. Any farm staff, vets, consultants, nutritionists, qualified people you buy any drugs for. And yeah, be interested in the comments box. Is there anyone else that you would include that I haven't included here? Because I'm always keen for more feedback to take to other meetings. Who you should involve in your health plan. So I'm going on about how I don't think this should be a yearly exercise. I think this should be reviewed more often, and certainly colleagues of mine have sort of devised this term called dynamic health planning, and that's what we mean is reviewing it more often, not just making it a yearly thing. So this example here, I've just jotted down some ideas. This would be an example of a sheep health plan. So if you cut your year down into quarters, and review it every quarter rather than every year. And what you want to do for every quarter is you look at the end of the quarter and you think, right, what are we aiming for there? What is the target there? what is going to stop us getting to that target? So in the first box here, I've put November to January, just because it's the time of year we're at just now. I thought it's a good place to start. So at the end of January, you might be thinking about scanning some ewes, right? And your target then would be, I'd really like an improved scan from last year. Now, not everyone wants an improved scan. Some people want less lambs in. So that's a talking point as well. You don't always want as many lambs as you can possibly get in them. It's not always a good thing. But yeah, just say for argument's sake, this farmer we've got here is looking for an improved scan. Now, if you were doing this on your farm, I'd want you to put an actual figure to that. Now, I appreciate not everyone scans, so there'll be other ways that you can pick your targets, and other ways throughout the year that you can, push a bit of improvement. But I would put, improved scan. So if we had 160 last year, and I'd be like, right, I'd really like to get them to 175 or something this year, put a figure on it, commit to trying to improve to that. Right, so we're sitting here, well, we're December now, and we're thinking, right, well, what's going to stop me getting to that improved scan figure? So it might be top's not working. So if you put yourself in your wellies on the day of the scan, you're a wee bit disappointed with it, and you're going to think, well, why has this happened? Could it be the tops haven't worked? Could it be my top to ewe ratio wasn't right? Did I use too many lambs? Should I have used some more shearlings? Were the body conditions going to my ewes right? Trace elements is one that we often get asked about. If people have had a scan that they're not quite happy with, we get asked, oh, could it be trace elements? And yes, you can do trace element testing at that point. But if they're normal at that point, it doesn't mean they were normal through tupping time. So it's really useful if you can stand on that day and be like, well, actually, I know the trace elements were fine because I tested them before they went to the tup. I know those tups were working because I fertility tested them before they went out. Fecal worm egg counting, you're thinking, oh, should I have dosed them before they went to the tup? Well, if you've done fecal worm egg counts at that point, well, yes, I did because they were high, or no, well, I checked and they were actually fine. And it's just really useful if you can, at that day where you're a wee bit disappointed in your scan or you haven't met your target, think, well, actually, it definitely wasn't this, it definitely wasn't this, definitely wasn't this. Conversely, if you're thinking about, I want to push my scan a wee bit higher, but you're 3 months away from it or 4 months away from it, whatever, a couple of months, then you can think, well, what's going to stop me getting there? And you've still got time to do something about it. You've still got time to put these interventions in to try and improve that. So yeah, moving on to the next sort of quadrant of the year. And this is what to do at your sit down meeting with your staff team. Right, okay, so we've done our scan, we're happy with that, right? Next thing we're thinking about is coming up to lambing time, and we want to reduce the lamb loss this time. We had too many losses last year, we want to try and reduce that. How are we going to do that, over the next three months or so? So interventions that I've come up with would be, right, think about new nutrition. Do you have an nutritionist involved? Have you analysed your silage? Investigate abortions. Is there something infectious that we could be vaccinating against? Not this year, because at that point it's often too late, but should we be thinking about that next year? You build that into your health plan next year. Think about getting clostridial vaccines into your ewes pre-lambing in a good timely manner. They have to be in within a certain time span before lambing. If you've got a long tupping period, then you're going to have a long lambing period. So you have to try and split your ewes to do the clostridial vaccines at good times. All these things will prevent lamb loss. You could just sail on and not do any of these things. But when you start losing lambs, if you start getting lots of abortions, start losing lots of lambs, you'll be thinking, oh, did the clostridial vaccine work? Is it their nutrition? Are they getting enough energy? Are they getting enough protein in their diet? Think about hygiene. We always harp on about hygiene. It's a massive thing that pushes lamb loss. And have a plan if the weather is awful and if you're lambing inside and you can't get things out, our stocking density is just going to get too high and that's going to push lamb loss higher. Try and have some sort of contingency plan to spread them out. It's not always possible, but if you've at least thought about it, if the worst happens, you can sort of act to try and reduce those losses. And then after lambing time, you can have a post lambing meeting. How did lambing go? Were we happy? Where were our losses? over lambing, and you can say, well, we blood tested the ewes when we know their nutrition was right. We blood tested them with the vet and we spoke to the nutritionist. The nutrition was good, so therefore we know that ewes should have had enough colostrum. Therefore our clostridial vaccines will have been effective because the lambs have got the goodness of them, all that sort of thing. And then yeah, going through the summer, you want to be thinking about, increasing lamb growth rate. What you don't want to do is get to the end of the summer and you're like, oh, these lambs aren't growing. They're not away yet. Why are they not away? And you don't want to be losing them at that stage either, because ideally they're easy at that time of year. They're just out on grass, they're growing away, they're on their mothers or at weaning. Um, so yeah, think about all the time. Your nutrition and body condition score comes into all these boxes because it's so important all the time. I often argue that kind of wish it had been a nutritionist instead of a vet, because a lot of the veterinary issues come down to nutrition, and a good nutritionist can solve them. Um, but yeah, you're going to be thinking about timely worm egg counts through the summertime. Do you need to be dosing them? Could you be saving money on drenches? And what you don't want to do is just cut them out, but ideally you want to test, do some fecal worm egg counts. A lot of vets will do them in-house now. And yeah, we'll tell you whether, is a high worm burden going to be affecting our growth rates? And yeah, clostridial vaccines, at what point do you need to get them into the lambs when their protection from their colostrum has waned? And yeah, what you don't want to do is be getting halfway through the summer and being like, oh, I've lost a few lambs. We didn't get those clostridial vaccines into them. Maybe we should have wormed them. Ideally, you want to be proactive and be doing these things before the losses happen. And I don't want to be all doom and gloom, because, most of us are doing a really good job. These are just ways to sort of just push that bottom line a wee bit more, push profitability and just reduce losses a wee bit. And then in the back end of the year, we're talking about tupping again. I know it's, we feel like we're just there just now, aren't we? But yeah, maintaining lamb growth rate in the back end of the year. Again, we get a lot of trace element testing in lambs, so it's really good to be proactive on that and get them tested before you see growth rates going down. And yeah, the big one in the back end of the year, or later summer, I would say, would be source your tups early and acclimatise them if possible. Ideally, from a biosecurity point of view as well, you don't want to be buying tups in and they're going out with you the next day. Or if you're in a ticky area, you might want to get them in, acclimatise them to tups before you want them to work, because the last thing you want to do is like let them meet ticks for the first time and then they maybe get a bit of a temperature, so it knocks out their fertility and they don't work. So be thinking ahead of these things, get them in, get them acclimatized before you need them. So that's a bit of a sheep example I've got there. Check how we are for time, we're not too bad. And this is a cattle one as well, so it's pretty much the same. Just think about your target. You want an improved scanning, you want to maintain daily live weight gain at housing and the back end. If you're calving in the spring, you want to reduce abortions coming up to calving, and yeah, you want more live calves on the ground. And you'll see in a lot of these boxes that nutrition and cow body condition score comes up again, because it's so important. But the main concept is to think about what your target is, what are we aiming for here? Okay, in the next 3 months, what is going to stop us getting there, and what interventions can I put in to stop these things happening, so that we can get to our target. And yeah, just marginal gains are good. You're not going to massively, change the world by doing this. But it's really, I just find it really motivating to have an aim and think about, why are you doing this? Why are you trudging about in this mud all winter? This is what we're aiming for. This is what we're doing. So yeah, it's a really good thing to sit down with your team, involve your vet, all the people we've discussed, and just get these things in place for your farm. And like I said earlier, what suits your farm will not suit your neighbour, so it needs to be sort of a bespoke thing that you do. So we talked about setting targets. They do need to be achievable. You're not going to go from 110% scanning up to 200 in 1 year, unless you have a massive change of breed or something like that. But yeah, make them achievable. And don't despair if you haven't met them, because the important thing is, can you answer why you have met them? What you don't want to be doing is standing there saying, did that bill work? Should I have got those pneumonia vaccines in earlier? Were they needing wormed? You don't want to be standing there asking that. You want to know, You want to be able to say, well, I know that bill worked because it was tested. I discussed my vet when we should do those vaccines and we did get them in on time. That sort of thing, you can be reassured that you've done as well as you can, and I think that's all we can ask of ourselves. Um, so a lot of what I've been talking about here is, using data like scanning percents and daily live weight gains, that sort of thing. And we don't all have, we don't all scan, we don't all have scales that we can, easily weigh things. More extensive systems just don't really have this data to hand. And that's fine because there is data that you do have to hand that you might not realize you have to hand. So um and it's really important to get your starting position as well, so you can improve year on year. If you've no idea what you're currently doing, how do you set your targets for where you want to get to? Um, so obviously we've got scanning data if you do scan, but you can also get a lot of information from places like SCOT-EID. You can see how many calves were registered for the amount of cows you've got. You can see the date of birth, the birth spreads as you're registering them. So therefore you can see, when um your billing period took place and were most of them billed early or later, that sort of thing. Try and tighten that up a wee bit. Falling stock invoices, you'll get all your data of your losses on there. Um, and I know there's going to be somebody saying, "Oh, we don't count all our dead lambs." So that's fine, but it's good to record these individual things somewhere, whether it be like a whiteboard in the lambing shed. If you've got vet students helping you out at lambing, or any other students, then it's a really good thing to get them to do is record some data in the shed because they're there, they're doing it, and yeah, just record it for you. Vet invoices, you're going to get information about your like antibiotic usage, that sort of thing. Um, a lot of these meetings that's come up, that WhatsApp groups are really useful on farm. If you've got a few staff members, a WhatsApp group, just recording deaths, recording births, recording assisted calvings, that sort of thing. It's just a really good place to just, even just send yourself a message, and have it recorded there so you can look back. Set up a group called Farm Performance or something, and then just send yourself a message, cow number, assisted calving, you know, how many assisted lambs you had, that sort of thing. It's all useful data to collect, and it's fairly easy to collect. It just needs to be done so you have it, so that you can then use it to benchmark yourself on the next year and set your targets. There's also sort of online tools that you can use. So some of your vets might use Herd Plan. This is a online tool devised by SRUC, which basically does exactly what we've discussed tonight. It allows you to set targets. It's got a calendar function that can, feed to your phone and just remind you of, when you have to do these interventions, when you should be chatting to your vet about doing some, blood testing or something like that. So, yeah, if your vet uses it, then great. Or you can mention to them that, you'd be keen to have a look at it and they can look into it for you. There's a farmer module as well that you can use just for your own records. So if you just Google herd plan, it'll come up and you can have a wee play with that. And I'm almost finished, but I just thought it was worth mentioning PSF funding. So this is preparing for sustainable farming funding. If you've not yet used it, it's available till the end of this month. And I really would encourage you to use it. So there's funding available for doing testing. So you can do, at this time of year, topical things would be calf respiratory disease testing, so pneumonia testing in calves, liver fluke and worm testing on sheep or cattle, sheep scab testing. All this stuff is available, and you can claim money for doing it. The testing has to be done by the end of the year and the claims in by the end of February. So if you haven't done that for this year already, I really would encourage you to use that, because all that information can feed into your health plan as well. So just to summarise, hopefully that's been useful to you. Yeah, it's a requirement for the whole farm plan. And yes, you can just use a tick box exercise, but I think it's a really good tool to sort of push enthusiasm in the staff, or even as yourself. Like, I love setting myself a target and trying to meet it. Yeah, so you can use it as a tool to increase your profitability, involve as many people as is involved in the animals as you can. But I think the really key thing is to review it regularly. If you do it as a once a year tick box exercise, chuck it in a drawer, you're not going to use it to its full potential. You might get it out once in a while to check what antibiotic did the vet advise for this, but that's not using it to its full potential. You really could be, pushing the bottom line with it. And yes, it costs money to do it, but I think it's, if you sit down and do it with your vet, it will cost um, for their time, but I think it's money well spent. Because you saw earlier on with the figures, if you can just push these marginal gains, these wee, decrease losses, just push the daily live weight gain, that sort of thing. Then yeah, it's a really good way to do that. And hopefully I've converted you all, and you agree. And yeah, if you want any more information, then chat to your local consultant, and get your vet involved as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Megan. That was really useful, and I think you've definitely clearly demonstrated that there's, far more benefit to completing your health plan than just ticking the box uh, for the whole farm plan. It's, I think it does a lot more, and certainly is a huge driver on livestock farms. As that would be the biggest driver really is animal health on livestock farms. There were a couple of questions or comments, if I can find them again. Yeah, so medicine records, would you normally see that included as part of a health plan? Um, a
So
bit of,
medicine records will be part of, like, if you get a farm insurance inspection, then they
yeah,
want to see your medicine records, but they wouldn't usually be included as part of the health plan. But what is increasingly included is a antibiotic audit. So seeing what type of antibiotics you're using, how much you're using, and if that can be reduced at all. So that's definitely something that your vet would need to be involved in to do that. But yeah, that's increasingly being involved as well.
yeah, I know when we did our health plan, it was something we reviewed with our vet, and they compared our use year on year just to see if there was any spikes and anything to sort of drill down as to what our issues were in the
Hmm.
last year that maybe um we could then be more proactive about this year.
Hmm.
Um, the other one was, oh, you had asked about other experts who you maybe get involved, or
Yeah.
people who you'd have involved at your talk. So somebody was just saying they would get more experts, like you mentioned, involved in their flock health club meetings. So which is a good point. Yeah, it's always good to get people along to these sort of meetings and sort of share a bit of expertise and bounce ideas off each other.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And a lot of vet practices run like flock health clubs and things now, and they're great to get involved in because some of them will do like anonymous benchmarking, so you can take your targets and compare them to other people's. And yes, farm by farm's not always comparable, but it's just quite good sometimes to just benchmark against, what are other people doing? Can I push that a wee bit more, or am I doing a really good job? So yeah, definitely flock health plans are a good thing to get involved in.
Yeah,
Um, or
there's nothing
or
like
um, ca cattle like health clubs as well.
yeah, yeah, there's nothing like learning from each other and picking up,
Hmm.
and you pick up those topical local issues that
Hmm.
you mentioned as well if it's you're discussing with people in your sort of immediate local area.
Hmm.
Um, and just the last comment was about somebody described their perfect year, what their sort of targets would be. So that was less lambs lost or predated, better biodiversity, and a lower carbon footprint. So really covering all the
Covering
points on
everything.
the whole
Yeah,
farm
sounds like a dream, doesn't it?
on the whole
Yeah.
farm plan there. So that's definitely good aspirations to have. But
Yeah.
as you say, it's not to beat yourself up if you don't meet them all, because some of those things are totally out with your control as well. And the
Absolutely.
weather
Yeah.
plays
And
such a big
that's
role.
the weather plays a massive role, and it is something you can't control, but you can control the controllable. And I think it's good if you do that. And yeah, at the end of the day, if you know you've done your best, then that's all you can do.
Yeah, exactly. I would just like to thank everybody. It's been such a really good turnout for the meeting tonight. Um, and tomorrow you will receive an email with a link just to give some feedback on the meeting. Um, so if it'd be really useful if you could. It really helps inform like future events we have and what sort of things you'd like to see. So we would really appreciate it if you could fill that in when you get a chance. It shouldn't take too long. And hopefully it's tonight's given you all a bit of as Megan said, stirred up a bit of enthusiasm to go and have a chat with your vet and get your health plan done and sort of see it as a way to progress your business. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll just close it for tonight.